After 42 years in Pinecrest Estates, I thought I knew everything about our little slice of suburban hell. Every petty rule, every clipboard-wielding busybody, every fine slipped under my door like a ransom note. But standing in the grand ballroom of the Westbrook Hotel, watching Karen Whitaker raise her champagne glass like she owned the universe, I realized I'd missed the one thing that actually mattered: the capacity of a so-called community leader to gut you in public and call it neighborly love. The room sparkled with fake crystal chandeliers and even faker smiles. 200 residents in their Sunday best, waiters gliding around with trays of overpriced finger food, the air thick with the scent of desperation and air freshener. My wife, Susan, squeezed my hand under the linen tablecloth, her nails digging in just enough to say, "We're in this together." I kept the corporate smile mask I'd perfected over decades of HOA board meetings. Neutral, polite, the face of a man who'd paid every ridiculous fine without complaint. Behind Karen, at the podium, her husband beamed like a game show host, their teenage kids glued to their phones, bored out of their minds. But my eyes locked on James Morrison, the HOA attorney who'd sat at the head table for 30 years, watching the show with an expression I'd never seen before. Karen's voice dripped honey and venom. "Folks, tonight we celebrate Tom Reynolds, our longest resident, the man who's always put Pinecrest first. Dad, Tom, has always believed in investing in the community. So when this incredible opportunity came up, we knew he'd want to support it." She raised her glass higher. "A toast to family, community, investment, and new beginnings." The room went dead silent. Even the waiters froze mid-step. I felt Susan's fingers tremble. Whispers rippled like a bad smell. Did she just say she took his retirement money? Can the HOA even do that? Poor Tom. On his big night. For hours earlier, I'd been in my garage, packing away 42 years of memories, photos of block parties before Karen turned them into fines for excessive laughter, the day we planted the community garden she later banned because vegetables attract rodents. My retirement package sat untouched, $1.8 million in carefully saved funds, stock options from my old job, enough to finally see Europe with Susan and spend winters in Florida instead of dodging Karen's lawn inspection drones. Karen had stopped by that afternoon while I boxed up old HOA newsletters, all sweetness and light. "Just one more thing. Tom," she'd cooed in the doorway, that practiced smile that always preceded disaster. "You'll back me up at the gala tonight, right? Why make the announcement?" "What announcement?" I'd asked. Her grin widened. "You'll see. It's brilliant. Trust me. Trust me." The same words she'd used when she talked the board into finding me $40,000 over 3 years for a flagpole that was 2 inches too tall. Another $75,000 in special assessments for her revolutionary neighborhood app that never launched. But this was different. This was my future. Now she stood there in her designer suit, probably bought with someone else's dues, announcing my life savings had been redirected to her latest scam. I pulled out my phone under the table, opened the banking app linked to my HOA portal account. The notification hit like a gut punch. Transfer complete. $1,800,000 to account ending in 4872. An account I didn't recognize. "Karen," I said quietly, but my voice carried across the suddenly silent ballroom like a gunshot. "What exactly did you do?" She turned that brilliant smile my way. "Tom, you're always saying community comes first. My friend Kyle runs this amazing cryptocurrency mining operation, guaranteed returns for solar panels on the clubhouse roof. We just needed a little startup capital." "A little startup capital," I repeated. "My entire retirement. It's completely safe," her husband chimed in from the side. "Kyle's a genius with crypto." "Kyle." The same Kyle who convinced Karen to invest community dues in a marijuana dispensary that never opened. The same Kyle who'd vanished with investor money twice before. I looked at Susan. The horror dawning on her face mirrored the collapse of every plan we'd made. That's when James Morrison stood up, straightening his tie with deliberate calm. "Actually," he said, voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "Before we continue this fascinating discussion about unauthorized transfers, I think it's time we clarify exactly who controls what at Pinecrest Estates, HOA." Karen's smile faltered. "James, this is a community matter." "Oh, I disagree," he replied, picking up his own phone. "Tom here isn't just our longest-paying resident. Would you like to tell them?" "Tom, or should I?" I nodded slowly, the weight of 42 years straightening my spine. I stood. "I'll tell them about the silent clause I wrote into the original bylaws back in 1984, I said quietly. "The one that makes me the controlling member of Pinecrest Estates, HOA Incorporated, with full veto power over all financial decisions." The room erupted in whispers. Karen's champagne glass trembled. "Tom, what are you talking about?" James smiled, but it wasn't kind. "Perhaps we should continue this somewhere more private. The corporate security office, for example. I believe they'd be very interested in hearing about unauthorized access to resident accounts." As hotel security appeared at the ballroom doors, Karen's face drained of color. She had planned the public humiliation perfectly. The toast, the community pressure, the money already moved. What she hadn't planned on was me having spent 42 years building something she never saw coming. Sometimes the quiet ones who pay every fine without complaint have the loudest secrets. The corporate security office of the Westbrook Hotel was all dark wood and leather chairs meant to make people feel important. No one felt important now. Karen sat with her head in her hands, designer suit suddenly looking cheap under the fluorescent lights. Her husband frantically texted someone, probably Kyle, who would ghost them any second. James Morrison stood by the window while two HOA security officers reviewed banking records on their tablets. The transfer was initiated at 3:42 p.m. using Mr. Thomas Reynolds's HOA portal credentials, Officer Collins reported. I watched Karen flinch. "How did you get my password?" "Karen." She mumbled something about the notebook in your desk drawer. "You keep all your passwords there." "Of course." The notebook I'd deliberately left out after her last emergency assessment, filled with outdated credentials. A security measure I'd started after the flagpole fiasco when I realized she'd been snooping. James turned from the window. "Show them." "Tom." I opened my laptop, pulled up the real transfer records. The retirement fund had never left the secure HOA escrow account I controlled. "What you accessed was a shadow system," Officer Collins explained. "A honeypot we monitor for exactly this kind of internal theft. When someone tries to move funds, it looks successful, but the money goes nowhere." Karen stopped texting. "So the money isn't in Kyle's account?" I asked quietly. "Kyle's not answering. Is he?" "Probably already changed his number like he did after the last scam." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Karen hadn't just tried to steal my retirement in front of 200 neighbors. She'd been caught in a trap I designed specifically for power-hungry board members who preached community first while lining their pockets. "Here's what's going to happen," James said, his attorney voice in full effect. "First, you're going to tell us exactly how you plan this, including Kyle's real identity and any other accomplices." "Tom," Karen started, fake tears welling up. "We can work something out. Pay you back slowly. For the good of the community." I held up my hand. "No, not this time. No more community excuses." James continued. "Second, we're pressing charges. Attempting to embezzle resident retirement funds through an HOA portal is a federal offense. The FBI has already been notified." Karen's husband burst into theatrical sobs. "We can't go to jail. What about our kids? You should have thought about them before committing fraud." Officer Collins replied without sympathy. My phone buzzed. "Susan texting. Want me to call Martha? Our family lawyer who'd handled the aftermath of Karen's previous special assessments. No, I typed back. Not this time. Karen must have seen the look on my face. Tom, please. We're neighbors. We're family here in Pinecrest. Family doesn't forge credentials and announce theft at a gala, I said. With what money were you planning to pay it back? The dues you skimmed for your revolutionary app? The fines you pocketed for grass 2 inches too long? She had no answer. She never did. James sat down across from him. The FBI will want to know about those other schemes, too. How much would you say you've redirected from residents over the years? Karen, I don't know exactly. $457,000, I said quietly. I kept records of everything. Karen gasped. Her husband went pale. Plus today's attempted theft of $1.8 million using stolen credentials, James added. That's quite a pattern. A knock interrupted. Agent Sarah Davidson, FBI Financial Crimes, strode in with 2 colleagues. I knew her from the seminars I'd quietly attended while pretending to be the compliant resident. Mr. Reynolds, she nodded. We have questions about unauthorized access to resident accounts. Karen stood, desperation cracking her voice. Tom, you can't let them do this. We're neighbors. Yes, I agreed. Which is why this stops now, before you try on someone else's retirement. The kids. Her husband started again. They'll be better off seeing consequences than learning that crime pays, I finished. Susan and I will make sure the community children are taken care of, the playground fund you raided, the scholarships you diverted. Agent Davidson opened her laptop. Let's start with Kyle Thompson's real identity. We have records of him running similar scams in 3 states. As Karen and her husband began their interviews, James pulled me aside. Most people would have just let the transfer happen and kept it private. Neighborhood shame and all that. I watched Karen slumped in her chair, detailing years of petty theft disguised as HOA enforcement. Sometimes the community needs public consequences. I enabled her too long, paying every fine, thinking I was keeping the peace. The story broke in the local news the next morning. HOA president accused of pension theft at annual gala leads to federal arrests. Karen and her husband's smiling photos from last year's Community Spirit Award featured prominently, now captioned with mugshots. My office, really just the spare bedroom, I'd turned into a command center over the years, filled with executives, lawyers, and FBI agents. We've traced connections to 5 other HOA fraud attempts across the state, Agent Davidson explained, spreading documents across my desk. Karen's friend Kyle, real name Kevin Bradbury, has been running this for years. Target longtime residents, manipulate board access, transfer funds to crypto wallets. Your son-in-law equivalent here was being groomed to take over the operation. We found plans for 3 other retiring residents next month. James Morrison leaned against the window, watching protesters outside my house with signs, "Protect our pensions. HOA fraud is still fraud." The press is having a field day, he said. The local paper wants a comment. They're calling it familial, community, financial abuse. I nodded, thinking about every fine I'd paid silently. Every rule I'd followed to avoid escalation. Each time I told myself I was keeping the peace. Each time I'd actually been funding Karen's descent into outright theft. My phone lit up with a text from the county jail. Tom, please. The public defender says 15 years minimum. You can't let this happen. I showed it to Agent Davidson. She shook her head. With her prior schemes and the interstate crypto element, she's looking at more. Her husband might get less if he cooperates. The kids? I asked. Child Services is recommending temporary placement while we sort the community fallout. Given your clean record and financial stability, you and Susan could petition for support roles in the neighborhood youth programs. Another text from Susan. Karen's family is threatening to sue us. Say we should have stopped her sooner. The irony burned. James cleared his throat. Tom, about your controlling clause in the bylaws. Yes. The board is meeting this afternoon. Given your original stake and long-term investment in this community, they'd like you to consider taking a permanent advisory seat. Help us strengthen internal controls against exactly this type of fraud. I looked at the boxes of HOA newsletters I'd been packing yesterday. I thought I was retiring from all this. Maybe, James smiled. You could delay that a bit. We could use your expertise, especially now. Agent Davidson added, having someone with your background helping prevent HOA scams would send a strong message. My phone buzzed again. A message from a retiring teacher 2 streets over who'd almost lost $230,000 to Kyle's scheme last month. Thank you, she wrote. Karen's arrest helped freeze everything in time. You saved our retirement. I thought about Karen in her cell, probably still believing I'd bail her out like I'd bailed the community out for decades. About her husband facing charges while the family blamed everyone but themselves. About the neighborhood kids who'd almost lost their playground fund. The board meeting. I said to James, "What time?" 2 p.m. We're announcing a complete security overhaul, new protocols for resident accounts, enhanced monitoring of all retirement-linked portals. I opened my laptop, pulled up the presentation I'd been building since 4 a.m. Add this to the agenda. It's a complete analysis of how Karen accessed the system, where the vulnerabilities were, and how to prevent it again. Agent Davidson looked over my shoulder. You did this all night? No, I corrected. I've been building this for years. Every time Karen issued a fine, every scheme she tried, I documented the pattern. I just didn't act soon enough. James reviewed the slides. This is comprehensive. The behavioral red flags, the financial patterns, the social engineering tactics disguised as community rules. 42 years of dealing with HOA bureaucracy taught me to track everything, even when I didn't want to admit what the data showed. My office phone rang, the jail again. I let it go to voicemail. They'll keep trying, Agent Davidson warned. Community pressure is their strongest tool. Yes, I agreed. But community truth is stronger. I stood, gathering the files. I'll present this on one condition. We make it public. Share it with every HOA in the state. Create a network to track these schemes across neighborhoods. No more hiding fraud behind "we're all family" signs. That could affect property values, James warned. It shows leadership, I corrected, and integrity. 2 things Karen never understood. Agent Davidson smiled. I'll have our cyber division coordinate. Build something that helps other communities protect their residents. As they left, I looked at the old neighborhood photo still on my wall. Karen at her first election before the scheme started. Her husband at their welcome party. The kids at last year's block party still innocent. I took it down, placed it in the packing box. Time to focus on the neighbors who deserve protection. 1 year later, I sat in a different conference room, facing a different crowd. The National Conference on HOA Governance had asked me to deliver the keynote. Behind me, a screen displayed the results of what we built from the ashes of Karen's betrayal, the HOA Fraud Prevention Network, now implemented at over 200 associations nationwide. In the past 12 months, this network has prevented 43 attempted pension and reserve fund thefts, totaling more than $47 million in protected homeowner savings. 38 of those attempts involved board members preaching community first. The audience, HOA presidents, attorneys, regulators, scribbled notes. In the front row, James Morrison nodded beside Agent Davidson. But statistics don't tell the real story, I continued. The real story is what happens when we choose truth over neighborhood loyalty, prevention over enabling, and accountability over silence. My phone buzzed silently in my pocket. Probably another call from a prison where Karen was serving 18 years after the full scope of her operation came to light. Her husband had turned state's evidence, receiving 5 years in exchange for exposing the entire network. The hardest part isn't building the security systems, I told the crowd. It's acknowledging that sometimes the greatest threats come from the people we trusted to enforce the rules. After the presentation, during the reception, people kept approaching with similar stories. An HOA treasurer whose president had tried to redirect reserve funds. A retiring couple who caught their board vice president skimming dues. The pattern was always the same: petty rules to build power, then outright theft. The assumption that we're all family would prevent consequences. James found me by the coffee station. The state legislature is implementing your protocols statewide, he said. Every HOA will be required to have similar protections by next year. Good. I stir my coffee, thinking about the latest letter from Karen's lawyer. Another appeal claiming community loyalty should supersede criminal charges. Any word on the Bradbury case? James nodded grimly. Kyle's operation had tentacles in 12 states. Karen's testimony helped crack it open. But she still did what she did. Have you visited her? He asked. No, I'd made that decision early. The therapist said it was better for her rehabilitation without expecting rescue. My phone buzzed again. Susan this time with better news. A photo of our grandchildren at their school science fair. They lived with us now after the court granted support placement 6 months ago when Karen's schemes left neighborhood families scrambling. In the picture, they were smiling, holding blue ribbons, looking like kids again instead of collateral damage in an adult power grab. They're healing, Agent Davidson said, appearing beside me. She'd seen the photo. That's what matters most. They ask about the old neighborhood sometimes. I admitted. It's hard to explain. You tell them the truth, she replied. That's more valuable than any inheritance Karen would have stolen. The conference continued with technical sessions, but during my closing remarks, I focused on something different. We're not just protecting money, I told them. We're protecting neighborhoods from their own worst impulses. Every retirement we save is a family's future. Every fraud we prevent is a potential redemption. Afterward, in my hotel room, I finally opened Karen's latest letter. Tom, the prosecutors offered a deal. If you testify about Kyle's other operations, they'll reduce my sentence. Please, we're neighbors. Don't let me spend 18 years in here. I set the letter aside and opened my laptop, pulling up the presentation I'd given earlier. The last slide showed a simple statistic. 94% of prevented HOA fraud attempts came after residents reported suspicious activity. My phone rang, the prison again. This time I answered. Hello, Karen, Tom. Her voice was desperate. Did you get my letter? About the deal? Yes. And I thought about the grandchildren doing homework at our kitchen table. About Susan finally sleeping through the night. About the neighborhoods we'd helped protect. The prosecutors already have my testimony, I said quietly. I gave it last month about Kyle, about the other operations, about everything. Silence. But they said it would help reduce my sentence. No, Karen. They said my testimony would help catch Kyle's other accomplices. Your sentence stands. Tom, please. Goodbye. Karen, get real help while you're in there. I hung up, looking out the hotel window at the city lights. My phone buzzed with a text from Susan. The kids want to know if you'll be home for breakfast tomorrow. Tommy has a math test he wants to show you. I smiled, thinking about second chances and better legacies. On my way, I replied, tell them Grandpa's bringing donuts. Later that night, reviewing the conference notes, I added one final line to our HOA security protocol. The strongest protection against board fraud is community truth. Sometimes the hardest investments aren't financial, they're emotional. The willingness to stand firm, to choose right over easy, to build something better from broken trust. My retirement hadn't gone as planned. Instead of golf courses and leisure, I'd built a national watchdog network. Instead of quiet winters in Florida, I was raising awareness and helping neighborhood kids whose parents had been collateral damage. Instead of block parties with Karen, I was protecting other families from presidents like her. But looking at the grandchildren's science fair photo on my desk, I knew I'd finally invested in the right future. The flagpole in my yard stands exactly 3 inches taller than allowed now, just because I can. The grass is whatever length the kids want. And every time a new HOA board member starts preaching community first, I smile, because I know the honeypot is still running. Some nights, Susan and I sit on the porch watching the neighborhood lights. She squeezes my hand the same way she did that night in the ballroom. "You did good, Tom." I think about the quiet man who paid every fine for 42 years. The man who smiled through every insult. The man who waited. Then I think about Karen in her cell, still probably writing letters about how it was all for the community. And I laugh, the dark, satisfied laugh of someone who finally stopped enabling the tyrant next door. Because in Pinecrest Estates, the real community won. And the Karen who thought she could steal a retirement in front of 200 witnesses learned the hardest rule of all. Sometimes the quiet neighbor who never complained is the one who wins the game. The end.